Rayman is back. Sorta ish. Not yet ish. But regardless of that fact, he is back. And this time, ladies and gentlemen, it is not a matter of if, but a matter of when. And that's what I will be talking about here today for episode 17 of Richie's Thoughts, where we will talk about the return of Rayman, which was confirmed by Ubisoft themselves, which honestly was a massive shock to everyone because them even mentioning Rayman in this current day and age is a massive shock, considering that, in my opinion at least, that they can give less of a giant fuck about Rayman. But I guess a broken clock can tell time right every now and then, if you know what I mean. But yeah, let's dive deep into that info. And honestly, it's not that much info, but as we all know, that will never stop me from any form of discussion and, possible theories to fly out of my mouth. So let's get right into it. But before we get started on the whole discussion for today's episode, I do want to apologize to everyone that has been expecting content from me as of lately, and has been disappointed to see that there really hasn't been any or anything at all from me personally on my YouTube channel, on my Twitch, TikTok, etc. But yeah, I really do apologize, guys. It's just been really busy on my end when it comes to my university studies, which I'm projected to graduate by the end of spring of 2026. So I want to make sure that goal in itself for my bachelor's of journalism and media studies is accomplished. And then just other IRL stuff going on. Nothing too serious, thankfully, but there are some parts of life that I just want to enjoy right now, and I will never stop making content because content is something that, this kind of content anyways, this kind of content really speaks true to what I want to do, which is really podcasting, get into these discussions, and just, having a great time, putting my thoughts out there and see, what people think, and, et cetera, et cetera. So I apologize once again if you guys have not gotten anything from me as far as the streams, the videos, and all of that is concerned. I will slowly get back into it, but for the meantime, I'll just try to put out a little bit as I can. Maybe it'll get a little bit better during the summer break that's coming up, but I honestly can't really guarantee anything. But what I will say is that I'm not going to stop making content. The content will continue, but I just want to be very mindful of my own schedule, so that way I can still provide the great content that you guys expect of me while also enjoying myself. But yeah, that's all I wanted to say before we get into today's episode of Richie's thoughts. So yeah, that's all I have to say at the moment. And as always, guys, you guys can also follow my social channels outside of this YouTube channel for more updates, uploads, and such. But yeah, let's get right into it. But yeah, so the first thing that we'll talk about here for the excuse me, the first thing that we'll talk about here for the Rayman topic for today's episode is that I think that we should start off by looking at the very first verified publication that was the first one to really talk about the news of Rayman's return. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was none other than Insider Gaming. Now, on October 23rd of 2024, wait, did I say 23rd? Yeah, I did say 23rd. October 23rd of last year, they came out with an article with the title, and I quote, Rayman Remake Development Bolstered by Former Prince of Persia Team. Which is interesting because not too long ago, prior to that article's release last year, which I think was about a day or two or something at that time, I think, there were reports about Ubisoft disbanding that same team that was behind that Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown game. But it was also the same exact team, for those that don't know, that was also behind Rayman Origins and Legends, which is why if you follow a bunch of Rayman fan accounts and just Rayman fans in general, you would probably now understand why during that day, or yeah, during that day before this little announcement came out, you can see now that why that the Rayman fan base was very, very angry with the initial news of the Lost Crown team being disbanded. Not just because of the fact that a awesome team of developers got disbanded because of the layoffs and everything that really took storm last year, but also not just because of the fact it's a great game and great set of people, like I just said, but also of the fact that because of the fact of their association with the Rayman franchise. And the news to me just adds more, points to the idea that Ubisoft just doesn't really care about Rayman at all. But all of us, not even myself, as someone that is rather optimistic about things at times, all of us didn't really expect that we would then get the news that the limbless hero will be making his return, as I alluded to, as the video title says down below. And no, we do not have a return date. That is yet to be determined. But he will be making his return to your local video game console and PC soon, which we'll dive in deep into. So, anyways, let's keep going with the article and go further right into it. But yeah, first things first, it is important to mention that this is not only regarded as a new Rayman game, but it is specifically mentioned that it's a remake, which is really, really interesting, which we'll dive deep into later on. But I do find that very interesting. But I just wanted to mention that right out the gate. But also to add on to that information, it's also mentioned in the article from their verified sources. Yes, the same article, guys, from Insider Gaming, so we're not confused. From the verified sources that the project is under development with the code name Project Steambot, and it's being pieced together by a team located primarily at Ubisoft Milan. Hopefully, I got that right. If not, I sincerely apologize I sincerely apologize to anyone that from that team of Ubisoft that is somehow watching this video. I'm sorry for botching that if I did. Now that there are some projects in the world of media where the code name of a project does sometimes indicate something at hand, but if you want my personal opinion, at least about it, it's more likely that it usually doesn't mean anything than it does, meaning something. And you also have to understand the context of the project at hand as well. So I doubt, at least for now, that Steambot, as it says for the project name, is really going to mean anything for whatever Rayman game is going to get the remake treatment. Now, again, I could be completely wrong. Maybe the project name could lead to something, or it could give some sort of indication, but for now, I'm going to just say it doesn't. And if I'm wrong, well, I am wrong. So, but yeah, the next thing to bring up, which is probably one of the most interesting aspects of this project, is none other than the man that really brought Rayman to the forefront and really was responsible for his creation to the world of gaming after all. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is none other than Michel Ancel. Now, the article does mention, the same one from Insider Gaming, the article does mention from their sources that Ancel is involved in the project as a consultant, which is great news for those that have this fear that the remake would stray away from what makes Rayman, Rayman. So having the creator of the character on board as a consultant to the remake project, even though, if I have to be kind of honest with you guys, I have a funny feeling that he'll probably just be a little bit more than just a consultant, Just because he's the creator of Rayman and all, plus his expertise in game development and of the character Rayman himself and his universe. But anyways, let's keep going. But yeah, so I think to me, it's still without a doubt a major concern erased away about whether or not the remake will be faithful to the whole point of Rayman, his universe, and the themes of Rayman's world. And I think him being there will help to make sure that the world of Rayman is rather consistent in this brand new project. And speaking of Ansel, obviously there are some concerns which were brought up, according to the article from the either sources, um, from the company about his involvement in the project because of the controversy. For those that don't know, where Ansel, near the end of his time in game development, really found himself embroiled in a toxic leadership debacle, which was pioneered by a French news outlet back in 2020. And that alone, ladies and gentlemen, has left a negative presence onto the project itself due to his involvement, even if it is from a consultant standpoint. But to me personally, unless he pulls a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and turns it into a complete fucking dickhead, then I don't really anticipate the project to be outright canceled. Because, in all honesty, and I'm not trying to downplay any potential victims that came about from this debacle of toxic leadership, supposedly, and etc. etc. I just think it would be completely crazy to outright shut down the project because of such things. Because the project to me would only get canceled if the development is not going anywhere and progression at the point of which needed to be made is not being made. And of course, maybe the development team just ends up revolting against like any potential negatives in terms of the workplace environment and all that stuff. So, but I do very much so trust that people within those development teams will stand up for what's right if they do feel like that their rights, their workplace being and etc. is being trampled on. So I have full faith that the team can do that, and I trust that Ansel, regardless if he was guilty of this or not, I just have the confidence and the hope that he will not get into this embroiled toxic behavior that was being reported, and that this project could go smoothly. Everyone can work together, and work towards the common goal of bringing Rayman back to the world of video games and really have him up in the forefront again. So, but yeah, anyways, just to continue on, or just to put the bow tie on this part of it. But yeah, so yeah, I don't expect again the project to really be outright canceled because again, it would not only just be really crazy, but I think it would also be like a massive gut punch to the entire gut punch to the entire Rayman community. Oh, and by the way, before I forget, it was also reported in the article that at least at least around a dozen developers from that disbanded Prince of Persia team have migrated to work on the Rayman remake. Which, by the way, that's the way that the article mentioned from the title of it all. So it's not just me saying remake just to be all fake and game like fake views, but that's just what the article says. So who knows if it'll be a remake or not. Now, the next thing I'll talk about is this little statement that Ubisoft has put out when they were asked about basically the existence of this project. And when you look at it, and I'll talk about it here in a second of what they actually said, this honestly to me isn't much of a statement, but there are two things to bring up in particular about it. Obviously, the first thing that I just mentioned is about Ubisoft's statement about the project, and also it does include comments by Michel Ancel. So first of all, let's dive deep into or not dive deep. Let's deep. you guys can tell I'm on a roll today. I haven't made content in forever. But first, let's dive deep into Ubisoft's statement, and then we'll go to Ansel's comments and offer an opinion or two if I have any. So here's Ubisoft's statement, which says, and I quote: "We are pleased to confirm Ubisoft Montpellier and Ubisoft Milan have recently started an exploration phase on the Rayman brand. A spokesperson, I'm on the roll today, aren't I? A spokesperson for Ubisoft told website Kotaku in an email. The project is still in its early stages, and we will share more details later. As far as Ansel's involvement, the company said, and I quote, as creator of the Rayman brand, Michel Ancel is being consulted to ensure consistency within the universe," which I've said before earlier regarding his involvement in the project, which I said, him being involved really does ensure like the consistency of Rayman's universe. And he's there to also, again, ensure things in a remake are faithful to, Rayman and his world. Now, last week but not least, let's go over Michel Ancel's comments that he made about the project and etc., where he says, and I quote, I see a lot being said about me again. I'm available to debate publicly with my anonymous haters or go to court if they so wish. Damn. I believe these are transparent and effective means of action, far from the background noise of journalist justice network seeking clicks and recognition. To all victims, regroup, grab justice instead of anonymously contacting YouTubers or journalists who are only waiting for the crunchy nugget that will fund their channel and boost their ego by grabbing unverifiable info with cool editing and trendy punchlines. Holy shit! Ansel really just, oh my god, he just eviscerated like almost most of YouTube. Holy shit. Oh wow. I have to say that's pretty good. Ansel is not fucking around. He said, y'all want to debate? Shit, let's go. Let's go to court. And fuck you and your fucking cool editing and trendy punchlines. We can settle with the facts. I like this guy. But yeah, as far as there's actually more to it, but I just wanted to point out that was really awesome. So, but yeah, let me continue on with his comments. Regarding Rayman, I'm very happy to have been consulted, and it's a real pleasure to know that he and his pals are back. For the Lost Crown Pop team, let's hope they can reform and produce a well-deserved sequel. Ubisoft to realize that the success of such project is associated with a birth of strong collective. This is priceless. Maybe someday leaders will understand this. Returning to my personal projects and little zoos, as this was so ironically presented in an article filled with contempt. So that's the end of it. End of quote. So not much to say really with the statement, other than my pleasure a few minutes ago with the way that he was eviscerating those fucking frauds. But yeah, not very much to say. But what I will mention is that you could tell that he's really, excited, obviously excited about the prospect of Rayman returning. And to me, having a huge hand in that return, which tells me that he really still has the heart and desire to really make it happen, which is great because I would want for him to feel motivated. I would want for him to have the desire for his return, so that way the project in itself doesn't really end up half-assed. Now, as far as other things, and I mentioned this already, if you're willing to go bat the way he mentioned in the statement about defending himself from attacks of malice, is putting himself on the line in the fashion that he stated is honestly very respectable, and honestly, defending his own integrity, which if he does prove correct, which I don't know if I don't know if the claims before were even verified or not. But if he does prove himself correct that those attacks of malice were basically a bunch of shit, then it will give him a massive boost. Like he can once he proves that those attacks on him are false, it really does bring in like a massive boost of integrity and character in a way, because you're able to defend yourself in these kinds of manners. Now, anyways, with that being said, let's finally now dive deep into this whole thing in the typical R5 97 fashion, with a lot of misstuttering, with a lot of stuttering, with a lot of yapping, with whole lot of things, which I'm sure you guys have come to know me when it comes to these videos. So, um, but yeah, anyways, let's go right into it. First of all, it is without a doubt in my mind that this is the best news next to the announcement of Rayman having his own DLC for Mario Rabbids Sparks of Hope, that the Rayman community possibly could have gotten at all as within the last 10 years. The last 10 years, guys. The last 10 years. And I say that just because, the Rayman community has been waiting for a very long time for a brand new game for the series. And while we will go into it a little bit here on where it could go, how it could, and etc., the news, honestly, is just absolutely amazing for this community. And it's honestly best to know this now. Well, at the time, or at the time before when the article came out, it was the best time to know that, and it still is now, honestly, in April of 2025. It's still best to know this now, because for those that don't know, Rayman's 30th anniversary is this year, and there just has been this massive caution of hope and dreamy that Ubisoft would fully acknowledge this series and really bring it a brand new game to a series that really brought them the light of success as a company and much more. And speaking of the remake project at hand, as we're made to believe, the big question that everyone has on their mind regarding it is, what game of the Rayman series is going to be given the remake treatment? And whichever one it is, how will it be done? The way I will do this is by going through every main series game in a process by elimination style, where I would go through each entries of the series. I will then explain why I don't think that the game is the one getting the remake treatment, or why I think it could/will get the remake treatment, and etc. So let's get started. Now, the first one up I'll be talking about here is two games, just because they're both very similar to each other and happen to be the most recent entries of the series, released around 10 plus years ago. And that, what I'm talking about, ladies and gentlemen, is none other than Rayman Origins and Rayman Legends. Now, for Rayman Origins and Rayman Legends, I'm going with them first to eliminate them from the remake contention pool. Now, you might be thinking, why is that the case? Well, the reason being is just because, to me, in my opinion, it just doesn't make any sense to remake the same style of, that both games present, which is a 2D side-scrolling platformer with some aspects that you can argue are 3D. But in my opinion, they're kind of, without a doubt, 2D for the most part. But yeah, anyways, I just don't think it makes sense, because while they aren't directly a remake/remaster to Rayman 1, which it was supposed to be originally before that got changed, they essentially still channel in the whole spirit of Rayman 1 in terms of again with the 2D side scrolling, the difficulty, and the other callbacks within the mechanics of the game and the abilities that really kind of tell you that this is kind of like their modern take on Rayman 1. So, and also just because they're also like the more recent entries of the series. So I think because of that and other reasons that I just stated, Origins and Legends are, to me, eliminated from the contention pool, and I don't think they will be the upcoming remake that we're speculating here. Next one up is a little tricky, just because we just talked about the similar style of Origins/Legends to this entry. But what I'm talking about here next, ladies and gentlemen, is none other than Rayman 1. And this one will be tricky, just because while yes, it's the same style of a 2D side-scroller platformer like Origins and Legends, Rayman 1 is a more proper old school platformer that has the obvious spike of difficulty once you get to the second land. Well, in my opinion, at least. And to me, it has a more slow, deliberate pace to it. And I think, to me, in my opinion, I'm not sure how you guys personally feel about this, but I definitely do think that Rayman 1 can really be a prime candidate for a remake. Just because, and this is something I think a lot of people can agree, the original game's difficulty does not translate very well today. It just does not translate very well at all. And I do think that certain gameplay builds of it, and when I say gameplay builds, I'm talking about like mechanics and how you're supposed to get from point A to point B, etc., etc. I just think a lot of that, or certain parts of it, just translate very poorly. So I think remaking this game remaking this exact game, excuse me, in this fashion with a more modernized difficulty system and all other much needed QOL, which for those that don't know, that means quality of life improvements that it really needs. So for this one, I will say that Rayman 1 is a candidate for the remake project, and obviously by that confirmation, still part of the contention pool for a remake. Now, the third one up is none other than Rayman 2. And honestly, I personally think a Rayman 2 remake would absolutely be beautiful. And while yes, the game was also the source of many, many, many ports to different consoles back then, with the PS2 version having the most changes, but still the same overall type of game. The second game, to me, in my opinion, still holds up very well with the graphics, the beautiful music that really describes the atmosphere that you're in very accurately, and the story of Rayman's journey throughout the entire game is something that I honestly find myself to really enjoy, and it's something that does keep me fully engaged. Just because those other factors of what makes Rayman 2 really great, it really does help me to keep me on my seat. Really keep me focused and engaged. If Rayman 2 does end up being the one to be remade / remake here, I believe, along with the other two, which I'll mention the third one here in a second, I believe that it will take the Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy route, where it could just be a remake where it's fully built from the ground up with modern graphics and etc. to bring gamers of today the beautiful essence of Rayman's world. Because honestly, and I'm not even sure if Ubisoft themselves even have the original Rayman 2 code anymore, or I don't think they even have the Rayman 1 code, or even Rayman 3 for that matter. But regardless, my answer still doesn't change. But as far as, do I think Rayman 2 is a candidate for the remake stuff, or the remake project? Yeah, I think overall Rayman 2 is a very strong candidate for the remake project. And with the aspects that this game presents, I think it's very easy to tell why I think it's a strong choice, which I'll go over real quick again. The music is fucking great. I think the combat system is very simple, but it's effective. The character design is fucking glorious. The environment design is great. And I think with the way that certain games are, with how colorful they are, the way that the music draws out the stakes of the scene, I think Rayman 2 could very well be a very beautiful thing to witness with today's modern graphics and modern touch that will stay true to what, really made Rayman 2 good. So if Rayman 2 ends up being like the sole remake project, I wouldn't even be angry. I actually be very thrilled, because looking at that game with the modern touch, this could be chef's kiss. And that's why I also think, like I said at the very end there, of why I think it's also a very, very strong choice. And last but not least, ladies and gentlemen, and this one will be a little bit interesting to talk about, but I'll get to that in a second, regarding the rumors behind it. But the last one here, ladies and gentlemen, is none other than Rayman 3. And honestly, guys, just like Rayman 2, I fucking love Rayman 3. I love Rayman 3 from every aspect almost. And, I think most of it, like I said, I've come to enjoy. And it's really made my experience of playing the game really great. And I honestly can't wait to start, playing Rayman 3 on stream when we eventually get there. Now, like I did mention, there are some minor criticisms to present here, but I'll mention that here in a second as I give my opinion about the game first. Which I know I didn't do that for some of the other entries here in the series, but I'm giving my opinions for these two, and I guess the first one I mentioned before with Rayman 1 in particular, just because I think the first three games could be like strong candidates for like a trilogy like type remake, like I just presented with the idea of them doing what Crash Bandicoot did not too long ago. But anyways, I'm getting off track. So to start off, I think just to start with the pros. To start off, I think that the character presentation with Rayman 3 is very excellent because I think the way that they um I think the way that the character design for each of the characters, I think that those designs really speak well to the accuracy of that character. It's like looking at Rayman's design, and you could tell right away that, oh, he's a hero with great ambitions and he wants to do right. And you look at Glowbox, you can tell that he's the sidekick. You can also tell that he's a little bit of a goof, but he means very well based on like his color of character, of like the gloves and the way he's presented, and obviously the overall design. And then you look at Andre the Black Lum, you can tell that based on the way that his space is designed, the way that he's presented, and etc. You can tell that he's one of the villains. He's one of the bad guys. So I think the character design in this game is very excellent, and I think it's very solid. The level design I think is a little bit more colorful than Rayman 2, but I think they're both equally as great. So honestly, I don't think either or has like a major edge. I think they're both equally just as beautiful. And the gameplay, which does include the combat system, which I love for the most part, the gameplay is very solid. Although I will say that I'm actually not a big fan of the camera during most of the fights because sometimes I would be finding like somebody in front of me, and then sometimes if I have to move around just to catch up with the character, etc. Sometimes the camera just kind of gets stuck at a certain point of the structure in front of me, and I can't see whether or not I'm moving, if I'm landing my punches, if I'm getting hit. So that's just really one of my biggest issues with Rayman 3. It doesn't necessarily ruin my whole experience, but I can also understand why it would for some people. But yeah, I just wasn't a big fan of the camera at all during most of the fights. And honestly, if that wasn't an issue, I think that the overall gameplay of Rayman 3 would be perfect. But despite my issues with the camera and despite a little bit of certain level ups and the weird difficulty spike in some areas, I still very much come away from Rayman 3 very solid and very happy with it. Just because, also in addition, the way that it also handles the combat, and the way it handles the character design, the environment design, the music is beautiful. I think it does an excellent job of once again really showcasing the type of showcasing the type of situation that you're in. Like if you're somewhere peaceful and quiet, the music does a great job of really encapsulating that. Or if you're somewhere that's like very scary or very, you're like in the house of the villain, the music does a great job to feel very, not all the way scary, but it brings more suspense to it. It really reminds you that shit, you're really somewhere kind of scary. But yeah, I still think overall, just to go back to the combat thing, real quick, I still think the combat's solid. I just think the combat gets, I still think the combat gets a little bit of minus points for me just because of the camera interaction that I do think needs a little bit of fixing. Which again, like I mentioned before, I don't think that the camera interaction during the combat system is really all that sound. And I think that's a little bit poor because the way that Rayman 3 throws the emphasis at you with all the, about the combat and, how important it is and etc. to really look all over the place for your enemies, not having good camera work is that can actually ruin somebody's gameplay experience. Now, for me, it didn't really ruin it all the way completely. I could still deal with it, but I also still don't like it for the most part. So, it is what it is. But yeah, I would say a lot more, as you can clearly tell, but this video will just turn into a Rayman 3 review, so I don't want to do that. But what I will say overall is that I do think that it is another strong candidate for the remake project, and I do believe that with some modern upgrades to the camera, a little bit of a modern touch in the combat system, but don't take away of what made the combat system good. You relish in the colorful graphics, modern upgrades to the camera, and you really bring home the character design, environment, etc. that really made Rayman 3 great as a game as it is. I think it would be an absolute treat for Rayman fans out there to really experience should this get picked. So I think it's a very strong candidate, and I think, obviously, and this goes without saying, I think it's a very strong contender to be the remake project. So, and honestly, guys, speaking of Rayman 3, and this is what I was alluding to at the top of the Rayman 3 part of it, there is a rumor out there, and this comes from a era/Fami, which I think is like the discussion forum website. But if you guys know what I'm talking about, then you know what I mean. It comes from this user of Brazil. No, not the country Brazil, guys. No. Just the guy's name is literally just named Brazil, apparently. Who some people have said is a little bit credible. And here's a screenshot as it shows on the screen. Sorry, it's not in my little Richie Spots television, but I kind of didn't realize during I didn't realize while putting the images together that I forgot to put in that one on that TV, but fine, whatever. But yeah, so anyways, it says here that basically that there supposedly will be a Rayman 3 remaster that will come to the Switch 1. I can't believe I have to say that now. That will come to the Switch 1 in 2025 as an, and I quote, initiative from Nintendo to court third parties and help compensate for Nintendo's own internal teams for being too busy with the Switch 2, according to the screenshot at least. Now also in that same screenshot, as you see right now above or in front of you, the same person also said that they aren't sure, and I quote, if this is the same project as the other Rayman remake that's been reported. Now, this is very interesting because this to me is pretty telling, or maybe it is, or isn't, who knows, that the insider says that he isn't sure if the Rayman 3 rumor of a remaster for Switch 1 and the announced remake project are the same. And maybe, I have my tinfoil theory hat for this, and you can tell. But honestly, when I say this, it could, again, indicate that I do have the tinfoil hat on, as I mentioned. But to me, I think this could somewhat allude to the idea that I mentioned before about a Rayman remake trilogy of the first 3 games. I think, in my opinion, it can most definitely work, despite the differences between those 3 games, and I think it would bring a unique experience for Rayman fans, but also be a very welcoming experience as well to play those 3 games yet again, but with a modern touch alongside staying true to what made those games great in their own right. Now, another thing to bring up that I thought was interesting is, as of this recording on April 12th of this year, of 2025, a Twitter user of the name @RUniverseVK on Twitter, this person pointed out a job listing that specifically talks about Rayman. Now, in that listing, Ubisoft Montpellier, I hope I said that right, Ubisoft Montpellier, oh, maybe I did, I don't know, but if I didn't, I apologize. In this listing, Ubisoft Montpellier is seeking a lead FX artist, which I will show, or it should show right now in the video, but Here's the image of what that job listing looks like. Is seeking a lead FX artist, which means that the project is very much still underway of development. If you're honestly seeking out professionals to join your team to help develop the game, which I think that's a pretty easy conclusion to make, if you want my opinion. What I also find interesting about this is the fact that the listing very specifically says the Rayman brand instead of just the Rayman remake project that we've been talking about here. And that to me could mean some things here and there. But overall, I think it sounds like they are very much so interested in really trying to develop and bring back the brand of Rayman to the forefront. And for all Rayman fans, including myself, that have quite literally been begging a lot here, which we have been begging a lot here, let's be real here. But it's very valid begging for the past 10 years. And with his 30th anniversary coming up this year, it's not really that crazy, in my opinion. And I'll put this here right now. All the house money is going on this statement. No, just kidding. But no, I just don't think it's that crazy overall, in all seriousness, to really suggest that we will possibly get an announcement this summer of the Rayman project coming soon. And by then, hopefully, we will know exactly what is the project at hand in terms of which series entry is getting a remake, or it could very much so end up being an original project. Could that happen? Could it be a remake? Who knows? Or maybe two games. Who really knows, chat? Or chat, YouTube video. Who really knows? Also, just like the last comment I have here overall, I also do find it a little bit interesting that based on the details on the job listing for that lead FX artist position, it's very interesting just to see in itself of what is really required of the position and the qualifications behind said position. And it really helps you to make you understand what the stakes are of the position, especially the part where it mentions that the person will be, and I quote, the guarantor of the level of visual quality while respecting the creative vision. Which to me, I find that a little bit interesting to point out because it essentially, to me, holds up very well with what we were saying before and what the whole point of Michel Ancel being involved in this project means, which is really guaranteeing the visual quality while respecting the creative vision. And that to me, ladies and gentlemen, that creative vision and that statement very much so refers to the creative vision of Rayman's world. And what is Michel Ancel's job? His job is to make sure that creative vision is upheld. So getting somebody as the lead FX artist to guarantee that the visual quality is fucking, good, it's great, while also respecting that same creative Rayman vision that Michel Ancel is doing his best to make sure it's upheld very well and it's held to the standards of Rayman's world and the fans of the franchise that have been begging for this for a while. I think this is very telling of the consistency of that statement, that goal. So I just thought it was interesting to point out here for a second. So, but yeah, anyways, I think that's all I have to say on the topics so far, which is amazing that we've said this much for a project that honestly isn't really officially announced. Like, yes, I know, Ubisoft put out a statement and say, yeah, we're doing this. We'll have more information as it goes on, once we have more to share. But honestly, again, I'm still amazed that I was able to, really put together this much information and really have this much to say for, again, a project that isn't even officially announced. But hey, like I said before, or you probably have heard me say this on streams, whatever you watch the Insane Game Freak streams, my own streams, and other videos, when there is a will, there is a way. That's how I put it. If you want to put out your 2 cents about this type of project out there, and for me, regarding Rayman, this will be an easy task to do. Or, as a matter of fact, I have actually done this task. But I meant that statement in general for those that are looking to do something similar for either Rayman itself or just basically any other video game series that you happen to, like more. So, if there's anything else that I've missed about this topic as of now, I will either a make a short about it or give my or tweet out about it on my Twitter, which is at R4Dude97, with my thoughts there on that said piece of information. Now, with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning into today's episode of Richie Spots. I'm super sorry again if it's been a while, but like I mentioned before, life has just been pretty busy as of lately with again the university studies and IRL things going on, which again, thankfully, nothing too serious, but just something for me to take care of. Now, don't forget to comment, like the video, and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed today's video and other videos that I currently have up on the channel. Now, like I mentioned before, I will slowly get back into the content grind soon, so stay tuned for not only that from my YouTube channel, but also my Twitch as well for all sorts of content that you guys can expect from there, like retro gaming streams, modern game streaming sometimes, maybe discussion streams if I ever do that again, and all sorts of shit like the sports live view games for the NFL season. You can expect all that on my Twitch channel. And podcast episodes like this and other sorts of videos like reactions, reviews, etc. You can expect that type of content on the YouTube channel as well. And also my TikTok for the shorts regarding those other various pieces of content that I just mentioned. So, but yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. Again, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and I will see you guys next time. Have a great day, everybody.